into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, thank you. Erica, can you please conduct roll call?
Commissioner Arneridge,
Here.
Commissioner Bernal,
Here.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Here.
Chair Noah.
Here.
And we have a quorum with Commissioner G absent.
Great, thank you. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak under public comment? I'm just seeing if there's any public. I see one little one, but guess not, huh?
We do not have any public comments or online or in person.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to the consent calendar items. Are there any changes or comments from the committee? Does anybody want to pull an item? Would anyone like to speak from the public on the consent calendar? Any comments online?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay.
I'd move the item.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arneridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Aye.
Chair Noah.
Yes. Okay, we're now moving to the regular agenda items. The first item will be introduced by Lindy Johnson to provide an update on legislation at both state and federal levels.
Good morning, Chair Nowak, Commissioners. I'm happy to introduce Mr. Mark Watts, who is joining us online today to provide a state legislative update, followed by Ms. Kins to provide a federal legislative update. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just joining as a panelist. Appreciate, first of all, staff and management allowing me to do this virtual today. I'm on the Placer County Planning Commission, and we have a special out of normal order meeting this morning. So I'm here in Auburn, California. So getting on with the report, as you probably are all aware, the legislature is winding up all the bills that were introduced in their first house. The deadline is actually tomorrow, and I believe the Assembly has about 200 bills left to cover today and tomorrow, while the Senate had between 100 and 150 bills. And then as they've been filtering over to the opposite houses, they are being set up for referral to committee. So we'll start to see the referrals and get a game plan going for the last half of the session. In addition, June 15th is the deadline for the budget. I think there's a lot of us expecting a fairly bare bones budget that meets the constitutional requirement, and that some remaining major issues, things like possibly cap and trade and others, will be left to be dealt with at a later point in time and fed into the budget through amendments to the Budget Act over the summer. So I think that's a tactic that had been used a decade ago or so, and it worked at that time. So we're going to see if that works this time. The transportation budget, as you probably are aware, when it was introduced in January, saw no significant new positive proposals for transportation programs, nor were there any gosh, I'm stuck. Nor were there any negative proposals. The one good thing that came out in the January budget was the continuation of the agreement for the remainder of the $2 billion out of $4 that had been appropriated, continued to be appropriated in the Budget Act, and that was viewed as a good sign. However, now that we have moved further along in the year, the governors may revise, took a very unusual action to freeze or request a freeze on the general fund monies that would be added to the TIRCP, the Intercity Rail Improvement Program, the LC TOP, which is the low carbon operational funding for transit agencies on a formula basis pretty much, as well as the zero emission transit bus program. In essence, he's called for the elimination of the appropriations for that funding, so ostensibly so they could have a fair level playing field to negotiate cap and trade, because those programs all rely on cap and trade GGRF funding as well as general fund funding. So at this point in time, I would say that there's a very aggressive push being developed and led not just by the regions that have transit issues that they're concerned about and transit programs that have been funded that may see some of the money held up for some period of time, but the California Transit Association, along with some of the major construction unions and other organizations in the state, have put together a coalition. California Transit Association is the lead this time around. And I'll use their estimates. They're estimating that the impact on transit capital and operations program could be a total as much as $3 billion, with some of the money being sequestered that had already been allocated, as well as the new money that has not yet been allocated. And as a consequence, they're pushing very, very hard to get that GGRF, the cap and trade auction resources continued, as well as the general fund money that had been promised. Beyond that, I wanted to talk briefly about the activities that are ongoing now with respect to DMV and the regulations that they're developing for commercial autonomous vehicle activity. There is a letter being developed that would ask for support for a very, very specifically targeted exemption at this point in time that would allow first and last mile transit autonomy vehicles to have some relief, measure of relief from the overall regulatory package. Saw the letter was shared to me by Lindy, and it looks like it's ready to go. I'm not sure what the collection status is, but it's a strong effort to get that exemption in place. The concept there is if you can make the first and last mile connect better than it does now, or connect in places where there is no urban connection by using autonomous technology, that'll improve the operations of transit systems through access to trunk lines and major high quality stops. So it's an important effort that's underway right now. And I think that's what I wanted to report on today. And if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? No? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. I'm happy to turn it over to Brooke Kins to provide a federal legislative update.
Thanks, Lindy. Good morning, everyone. First item on the agenda that I wanted to discuss was a couple of weeks ago, we met with NHTSA to discuss autonomous vehicle regulations. Tim, Lindy, and Ryan did an excellent job in that meeting. This was part of their outreach to the public and private sector. I believe there's going to be another meeting scheduled in the next few weeks to go and discuss in more technical detail about GoMentum. Tim, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, but I thought it was a pretty good meeting that we had for about an hour. It was a panel of regulators in that meeting. The acting chief counsel was part of that meeting as well. So, Tim, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you summarized it well. Thank you.
Perfect. And then just high-level updates here in DC, because there's a lot going on, but what's really been a main focus for Congress, and I'm sure everyone's seen this, is that the House had passed their reconciliation plan, their package, and that was with a 215 to 214 vote. So it's now over in the Senate. The Senate's working through changes. The president has put a deadline that he would like it on his desk by July 4th. There's still a lot to work through here. It's possible that, the Senate aims to get this wrapped up before August recess, but this is the bulk of what Congress has been focused on, and particularly because CBO had just issued their report yesterday, scoring this bill, the House bill at least, that it would add 2.4 trillion to the deficit. Also, last week, the president had put out his full budget proposal for FY26. And that budget proposes significant funding for DOT. I think it was totaling in 147.1 billion. So over the course of the summer and the next few weeks, we will see subcommittees on appropriations start their hearings and their markup for appropriations. Also, I'm sure everyone's seeing in the news, tariffs are front and center, everything that's going on with that. So just to break that down for everyone in this room, last week, the U.S. Court of International Trade and the D.C. District Court ruled that IEEPA does not authorize the tariffs imposed by President Trump. The administration then appealed these decisions, and the U.S. Court of Appeals granted a short-term administrative stay of CTIA's ruling, or CIT's ruling, at least through June 9th. The appeals court is expected to make a determination on the status of the stay within the next week or so. And ultimately, it's likely this case would be appealed to the Supreme Court, which would extend the litigation for even several more months. The administration has signaled that they may seek other trade tools should IEEPA tariffs be blocked in courts. It's possible, in addition to that, that they would be expanding to the usage of sections 301, 232, and potentially 122. So that's, kind of the bulk of what Congress and the administration is focused on right now. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Brooke, what are those sections about? When you said 301, 230, I have no idea.
Yeah, so 232, and I need to kind of brush up on this for myself as well. 232, you'll see the steel and aluminum tariffs fall under that. A lot of manufacturing and auto parts fall under 232. 301, and again, I will need to get back to you if this is completely accurate, but to my knowledge, 301 also deals with battery cells, et
So
cetera.
they're industry specifics.
Yeah, they're
okay.
industry specific. That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
I
Joel?
have one. Yeah, and maybe this is a Tim question, but related to federal. Any updates on where we stand on the mega grant process?
Yeah, Tim, do you want to go ahead? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it's okay. I can provide a quick update. In fact, Stephanie and I were just talking about this yesterday. So actually, Stephanie, you want to give the update? I mean, you're the one coordinating and doing all the work, so.
The update is that we're still continuing the conversation with the DOT staff at the California office. We know that there's been one state that received mega funding, the agreement being executed, so they're just, from what I heard from the staff, is they're going down that line, the list. We owe them, we're going to work with them to provide them an updated schedule for the project so they know where we are and when we will absolutely need the money, and making sure they understand our concerns about having our local match still be there. We're not spent that too early against that mega grant funding. So yeah, conversations are still happening. We bug them every so often, every other week kind of thing, and make sure that they are aware that we need the money ASAP, and hopefully to obligate and execute the funding agreement, at least a small amount that's available.
Yeah, and I think on just the advocacy side of it, I think next steps is I need to talk to the California administrator, the Federal Highways California administrator, and just get a push from their side. And so to continue to kind of make sure it stays on their desk and stays on their radar. So the last time I talked to Alyssa Carnova was probably about a month ago. So I just want to continue to push and make sure it's on their radar. And then Brooke and the team, we've been talking about, how to kind of push on the federal level. So there's a couple things that I think we're going to probably continue to push through the EPW committee and kind of follow up on, Duffy's, hearing, and kind of get that angle. And then I think we're also going to work through our delegation, our members, to kind of continue to push on the secretary. But I think those are some of the things that we're just kind of doing on the advocacy side of it. But on the technical side, it seems like it's coming together, so.
I heard the one that got through had been from 2023, so,
Illinois DOT is the
Yeah.
only mega grant that was in our cohort that's been executed. Yeah,
that
so,
was
so at least that's positive signs
Yeah.
that they're gonna, and then it seems like, and we'll kind of see what happens, with the, obviously with the budget and how much money gets allocated to mega, but I think we're pretty confident that at least the 6 million that they're kind of committing and programming, for us in the grant agreement, I think will still be there, so.
Thank you. Reason why I was asking, I was going to see Pete Buttigieg tomorrow here in Boston. And I thought, not that he's in office anymore, but just his 2 cents on where things are at. But thank you for that. It's good to know.
any additional questions? No? Okay. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you. That's all from me.
I just wanted, one comment, SB 63 passed the Senate last week, 2610 along party lines. So now on to the Assembly.
Thank you, Chair Nowak.
Okay. Any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments at
Okay.
this time.
Great. Let's see. We will then move on to, we don't have any votes on that. Next item is going to be introduced by Terry Ann. Discuss CBPAC. I've lost track of acronyms. Sorry. I've just totally lost track. You're going to have to bail me out on that one.
Gotcha. Good morning, Chair Nowak and Commissioners. The Countywide Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, also referred to as CBPAC, advises on countywide issues related to bicyclists and pedestrians, including the Countywide Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, policies, funding, and review of complete streets checklists. The CBPAC is comprised of 13 primary member seats plus alternates, which includes 2 countywide at-large members who are appointed by the Authority Board. One position is familiar with youth, bicycling, and walking, and the other is familiar with seniors and people with disabilities. Each position will be appointed for a 2-year term from July 1st, 2025 through July 1st, 2027. The Authority conducted a recruitment process earlier this year, posting it on the Authority's website, social media, the 511 Contra Costa newsletter, and distributed via email to public information and communications professionals countywide. We received 4 applications from 3 potential candidates. 1 application was received from Candace Evans and 1 from Kyle Haywood for the position representing seniors and people with disabilities, and 1 from Danny Lannis and Kyle Haywood again for the position representing youth, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Following the interview process, we are requesting nominations to the full Authority Board for the 2 countywide at-large positions. The interview process will be conducted in the Diablo Conference Room. This is a closed interview, but may be open to the public upon request. We will allow the candidates into the breakout room into the Diablo one at a time. Each candidate will have up to 5 minutes to answer 3 questions. Each position will have a separate set of questions based on the individuals that they represent. The chair of the APC will ask the questions of the candidates. No follow-up questions may be asked until open session. The candidates will then come back into open session, and the next candidate will be brought into the Diablo Conference Room. Upon completion of the interviews, the members of the APC will convene back into open session for any follow-up deliberations, questions, and nominations, followed by a motion to recommend and appoint each position to the full Authority Board to be considered at the June 18th meeting. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and the members can now convene into the Diablo Conference Room.
Okay, so much for my words. We will now convene at the Diablo Conference Room, so.
gotta convince him. Yeah, I have no idea. Well, I think the important thing to tell the group is, like, we want to come in with a more broader, bigger vision of, like, okay, you've got all these homes, you gotta sell them. You're gonna have to sell them. Like told Ryan, you're gonna have to pitch it as like you're selling. Basically, explain to me like CCTA to come in and be a partner with the city and with Bishop Branch to really manage, you know, all this additional traffic and all these 1,600 homes that they plan to build. And so like we can help you in terms of like building this shared mobility hub, which really satisfies the conditions of approval, you know, for the development. And then one of the other ideas I have is that because we got this state money to the shared mobility hub, still do hopefully, is could we give Bishop Branch like a developer credit? Because we're using state money for the shared mobility hub. We could potentially give him like a developer credit. Like if he was supposed to build this thing as part of his condition of approval, like we can come in and do it for build it for him, give him a developer credit, and then basically that puts him hopefully more on foot on paying for the whole thing, right? So that was one angle that I wanted to kind of get through, and I think the other angle is really making this shared mobility hub this like placemaking and complementing the city center and like integrating the city center and make it a place where people are coming to, you know, not make it just about just Bishop Branch redevelopment, make it about like how do we eventually in the future like get shuttles that are going out into Santa Rosa, you know, bring people to his city, maybe even bring ambulance, you know, so it's really about just increasing that shed, and then like, I mean, one option is to have a really good connection between city center and the DMC campus, you know, that's right there. So it's just thinking like bigger and selling him like on a vision of like how we can come in and like and help their goal, which is really they want people to come to city center and spend money, right? And that's their goal. So I think it's, and then we talk about like how the shared mobility hub can be like a centerpiece to attract people there for transportation. And then obviously we talk about like the shared autonomous vehicle concept that comes along with it, you know, and how we can make that happen as well, and provide like a shuttle service that's a community that's then also to cities. And so I think we can bring all those innovative ideas. Yeah, Ryan's up to speed, and I think that's really that's the vision. And then I think the goal, either from this meeting or from my meeting from Alex, is I want to get like a letter of interest basically from Bishop Branch on basically having CCTA be their transportation for Bishop Branch. And basically we bring in the shared mobility hub, we bring in the SAVs, like we bring in a bike share program, all these things. And then basically what I want to do is really use Bishop Branch as like a living lab of like what this stuff is going to look like in the future. That's kind of my goal. So, what's that? Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
They
We okay? We all set to go? Yeah. We will now convene into open session for discussion. Are there any comments or follow-up questions from the committee? No? No? Have we received any, do we have any nominations from the committee? Let's start with the seniors. Countywide at-large position representing seniors and people with disabilities.
I'll go ahead. I would like to nominate Candace Evans to serve in this capacity related to the seniors and persons with disabilities.
I second.
Okay, any public comments?
There are no remote public comments or in-person public comments.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can we conduct the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arnerich,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Aye.
Chair Noah.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner G absent.
Okay, we'll now do nominations for the countywide at-large position representing youth, bicycling, and walking. Go ahead, Rita, sorry. Didn't want to cut you off.
I nominate Danny Lennis.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay, we have a nomination second. Any public comment on that?
There are no public comments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we please conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Arnerich,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Aye.
Chair Noah.
Yes. Okay, thank you, and thank you to everybody that had an interest. We really appreciate it. We had 3 great candidates, and we appreciate their interest in these positions. We'll move on to the next item is an action item presented by Brian Kelleher to discuss the fiscal year 2025-2026 proposed budget.
Good morning. My name is Brian Kelleher. I'm here to present the 2025-2026 proposed budget. This is a very lengthy process as we go through the budget. We start probably late January, February when we do the mid-year budget, and we transition immediately into the proposed budget for the following fiscal year. What makes CCTA a little different than some of the other agencies that you represent, a large portion of our budget is related to capital projects. You may have a capital projects budget separate from your operating budget that kind of flows together. We try and put both of these budgets in front of you and present it as early as possible. So as we're looking at the proposed summary of changes, we've always had a huge swing between the previous year and the current year, and a lot of it is based on the timing of our capital projects. As we're wrapping up delivering our Measure J programs and our capital project side, you can see that the budget has. Thank you. Is it not working? Okay. Sorry about that. And so year to year, this is probably the lowest I've ever seen it swing between 2 fiscal years. It's less than $1 million in change. Sales tax revenue, sales tax is what Measure J represents. We're leaving the sales tax revenues even at $120 million. Right now, it's projected to finish this fiscal year. We might be about 119.5. We're hoping it can get up to about 120 million, but with everything going on, as you heard in the federal meeting this morning with tariffs and uncertainty on the economy and interest rates are still relatively high. We worked with HDL and we thought the best position was to go ahead and continue at $120 million for this fiscal year. Hisham has an item that'll go through the proposed sales tax revenues through 2034 in his next presentation that follows mine. We have federal, state, and local revenues. We have probably 35 grants, a little more than 35 grants right now here at CCTA. A lot of it helps fund a lot of the new programs that we're doing. So as we look at the federal, state, and local revenues, investment and other incomes, we're about $4.8 million in investments. We probably have about $120 million in investments. We use an outside agency to help us with our investments. And in the last couple of years, we've tried to move out our treasuries positions so that we can capitalize on the higher interest rates, keep us there. And that's about 4.8 million. Other sources is money that we have collected since the beginning of Measure J. And so when we collect the money, and the timing of delivering the capital projects may happen in the future, it doesn't always have on a pay-go system. So we collect money, we have savings, and then when it's time to deliver the projects, we start utilizing those resources. Non-Measure J projects, that's another grant that we have for delivering for a lot of the normal cities. That's about $23 million. And so when you look at the projects division, you have $46 million, programs 78. Administrative section is 4.3. There's a decrease of about $2.4 million. When you think about, that's a big decrease for just the administrative section. In last year's budget, we paid off the pension. We made a pension payment of about $2.4 million, so that's what that represents. Debt service is going down $1.4 million. Last year's debt service was our maximum annual debt service based on all of our bonds through 2034, and we refinanced the 2015 bonds, which is saving us about $800,000 a year. Non-Measure J projects, that balances to up top the non-Measure J projects revenues. And as we look at the sales tax revenues, I like to put this in there from a historical standpoint, but if you look off to 22, 23, 24, 25, it's kind of leveled off. 2021, we're still coming out of the pandemic, different online sales and point of sale transaction laws weren't really in place, and so now you can see we're collecting about $120 million a year. Capital projects, funding from grants. This is a really big piece of our budget, is the grant program. The federal programs, we have the surface transportation, federal of 5.9 million, federal 6.1. We also have the mega grant, 2.2 million. We did talk about that earlier. It's a placeholder in case it gets approved during the fiscal year, which is July of 2025 through June of 2026. We have some RM3 funding and some other funding, which is local ECRFA money and some city money as well. The planning and CMA funding, federal surface transportation, $1 million that helps pay for the CMA function. Contributions from local agencies for streetlight data is about $200,000 of the $480,000 subscription. So the planning or the CMA function will cover the other $280,000. CMA local agencies, $1.4 million. That's a share of the budgeted CMA expenditures, less revenue. There's an asterisk on this. John presented to the Public Managers Association last month, and they declined to approve our budget at $1.4 million. We went back and we met with the subcommittee from the county. We met someone from Danville, and then there was another agency in West County. Was that Richmond? I believe it was Richmond. And we presented our budget and talked to them, and we're going to be going back in 2 weeks to present to the PMA. One of the suggestions that came out of it is to kind of level out the amount of contribution from all the cities and to the county, because it jumped from $650,000 to $1.4 million was quite drastic, but a lot of it has to do with the delivery of the CTP, which is about $1 million in the budget. And so we're going to hopefully round it down. We use some just basic figures, kind of reducing the budget about $425,000, continuing it out for several years to try and make us whole. The authority can cover that piece, but make sure that we're whole in the next couple of years. And then there's a contribution from GoMentum. They're in their contract. They have an annual contribution of $500,000. And so we put that in the budget as expected to be returned to CCTA. And then the city of San Ramon, as they're wrapping up their project, we have some cost overruns, not cost overruns on the project, but as the as they wrap up the project in the next fiscal year might be about $1.1 million. So when we look at the Measure J capital projects Series 1 through 9, it's $38.6 million. And then in the columns to the right, that's all the funding sources for all of the different projects that we have listed in there. And that totals $28.2 million. And in the staff report, we go through all of the individual funding sources. We talk about how it's being funded, federal, state, local, all of that in there. But what I like to do is just kind of highlight on a project level where all the money is. And then as you get to the bottom right, you see it's about $10.4 million, which is coming from years of revenue that we've received to finally deliver these projects. And one of the things that have happened over the last several years, people talk about, well, the Caldecott Tunnel, the BART East rail extension, you have some expenditures, 151, 181, SR4 widening, 366. And so what that is we use a consultant to help us deliver all of our projects and keep the whole projects division running. And so the cost of the consultants that we spread across all of these on a prorated percentage based off of the tax expenditure plan for Measure J is about $1 million in there for those programs. And as we look at all the different projects, you can see the difference from year to year, which ones have increased. The biggest difference in there is the I-680 corridor. Obviously, there's the mega grant piece in there. There's all of the other activities that are in there. We list all out the activities that are in the staff report, and always the folks from the projects division are always asking, can we talk about our projects? And so if you have any questions on that, Stephanie or Hisham or Ryan would love to talk about it. And then sub-regional major streets improvements is about $2.7 million. And I've highlighted in the middle of the sheet here, we have about Norris Canyon Barrier is about $600,000. And then the Diablo Road Trail is about $2 million of expenditures in there. And then the BART improvements is the Next Gen Fare Gates is about $2 million budgeted for next year. In the programs division, that's $78.6 million. There's a decrease of about $27.7 million. Again, it's a timing of a lot of these projects. And part of the decrease is the completion of the overcrossing in San Ramon, the Iron Horse Trail, local streets, in maintenance. Again, that's return to source funding. That's 20% of the sales tax revenue remains the same because the budget stayed the same. Decreases for the budget for the TLC program. Again, it's a timing of the projects. $13.8 million is set aside for that. The pet bike program has $3.6 million. And then we have decreases in the budget for the paratransit program is about $726,000. TFCA program is $1.9 million. And then the Momentum program, again, we mentioned we're going to have about $500,000 that we're going to receive in commitments. And then we're going to spend the $500,000. About half of that is going to go to salaries and benefits for the staff to work on that project. Innovation Alliance, which is a subscription that we utilize to move forward with them to build the project. AMG support is about $50,000 in the budget, and then we have $25,000 for the website, $25,000 for Hall and Night Connected Vehicle Alliance. And then we get to the planning division of about $7 million. Again, it's increasing because of what we're working on. We're trying to work on the capital or the CTP, and that's about $1.5 million for the CMA support. Is that regional planning task? $400,000. Big data, again, we mentioned $480,000. Corridor planning, $100,000. Fiber optics, $90,000. VMT mitigation and Vision Zero implementation, and also the bicycle and pedestrian plan. Salaries and benefits for state planning, programming, and monitoring is $584,000. So there's a direct trade-off there. So if we expect $584,000 in revenue, we allocate staff time to utilize all of those fundings so it doesn't expire. And then we also have in our budget on-call contracts awarded and budgeted is about $480,000. And then several contracts and studies in the planning division are also funded by OBAG 3 studies and action plans budget of about $1.5 million. And I've listed out the 3 projects there. Countywide emergency evacuation is 850, San Pablo Avenue multimodal, community-based transportation plan as well. When we get to the administrative division, we have a budget in there of about 4.3 million. Again, it's decreasing 2.3 million from the previous year. I mentioned that we paid off $2.4 million in February to our pension obligations with CalPERS, so that's the reduction. We have 27 positions that are in there. Increased property lease, $300,000. We just came off of when we did the implementation and the changing of the tenant. We renegotiated the lease, we had tenant improvements, and we negotiated a 7-month free rent. And so the 7 months of free rent has expired, and now we're paying for the 12 months of the rent. And so it's increasing $300,000 for next year. We have an increase of $65,000 for staff development. We decreased about $250,000 in professional services. And we've also did a whole bunch of replacements as part of the improvements here. In addition, we replaced about 10 computers for staff last year. So there's the decrease for next year of $40,000. Debt service is $43 million. Of that, the principal is $28.5 million. Interest due is $14.5 million. And the debt service represents about 36% of the $120 million. Authorized salaries and benefits is 8.7. That's for all staff. It goes up 1 million. We've increased positions. In next year's budget, we have all 27 positions in there. We also have 3 retired annuitants in there. We have the annual CPI increase that takes effect on July 1st. That's 2.4%. And then also the recruitment efforts are underway for the 2 vacant positions of the Director of Programs and Programs Manager. One of the biggest expenses for most municipalities is the pension piece. And so our classic employees is 11.4%. It's a very small increase. The Pepper employees, our cost is going up just a teeny bit as well. I do have a city background, and I do recall seeing, police, fire, and other employees at the cities, and sometimes their rates are anywhere from 15 to 22%. So we're sitting pretty good as a very small agency. And then our annual OPEB employer contribution rate, that helps us pay for post-retirement health benefits. We put in about 2%, and we are super funded on that. We put away a little extra money in there. And so I like to continue to do just 2% to make sure we're covering the ongoing costs on a regular basis, on an annual basis, so that we keep the savings account there full. Terry Ann mentioned earlier Assembly Bill 2561. This is something new that went into effect on January 1st, 2025. You may be seeing this at your agencies as well, but one thing we want to do is announce how many vacancies we have and what plans we have and what recruitment efforts we do. And so of the 27 positions, currently right now, we only have 24 positions filled, but we do have the Director of Construction that will start in a few weeks, and so that will be filled by next fiscal year. So that leaves us with the 2 empty positions for next fiscal year. The recruitments, again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, are ongoing for the Director of Programs and Programs Manager. Implemented steps to increase outreach efforts, attract diverse applicants from underserved communities through posting on websites directed towards women and minorities. Also part of the Assembly Bill 2561 is we list out what we do to work on retention for our employees. We strive to be an employer of choice. We encourage professional development and training of staff. And again, you saw the extra budget that we're putting aside for next year. Encourage succession planning through career leaders and growth opportunities. And we encourage a work-life balance through flexible work site, which allows staff to work from home a few days per week. With that, we'd like you to ask questions, and we'd like to take it to the board in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Brian. As always, a very thorough presentation. Appreciate it. Any questions? What happened to Newell? Do we still have Newell?
I'm here.
Oh, all right. checking.
Actually, I do have a question,
All
Brian.
right, well, then you might as well start.
Well, thank you. Brian, just as Sue said, thank you so much. This is complex for those that are just on this board. It's amazing. We get lots of money in and we give it away through projects and capital and programs. And so our balance sheet is always very different looking. I was just looking at, if we have 27 employees in our budget, that's an average cost of $322,000 an employee. So in that 8.7, and I haven't looked up the detail again lately, does that include all the burden of benefit, the pension obligations, and does that also have included any of the obligations we have for retirees in the 8.7 million?
The total cost for the employees is their salary. Then you have your overhead costs, which is your pension. You also have your insurance. You also have the OPEB liability. And so all of the fringe benefits that you can think of that go into it. We also have sick, vacation, and float as well. And you can carry up to a certain amount of balances. And so at the end of the year, if somebody utilizes all of those, there's no cost. And if somebody was to save it up and try and get it to the balance, there's a cost in that fiscal year for that piece as well.
So we plan for it. In other words, that whether they're using it or not, it'll show up as a carryover in the next year. So I'm just trying to get to, because 322 is higher than any of our agencies. So I was just trying to understand what was the rationale in that, and where do you see because we have to pay certain costs on retirees above and beyond what they get out of PERS, things like that. Is that included in the 8.7, or is that a separate one?
We have a very small cost for maybe one individual, and we pay that directly, and it's included in our budget.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and well done.
Any additional questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. This is related to the PERS, the classic 11% or so. It's at an increase over last year. Is that what that number represented?
Yeah, it went up less than like 0.1% or something like that, yeah.
Okay. And then do you have, PERS always kind of a couple years, we're catching up all the time, I guess. Do you have any idea of what's going to be the impact to this budget over the long term? I know it's kind of a hard question to answer because of discount rates, a lot of different things, but do you have a projection for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and answer that in two ways. In February, I presented to the board, like you mentioned, they're always 1 year in the rear, right? And so we knew what our 2024 pension obligation was, and that was $2.4 million. And so we paid that off. And again, you mentioned the discount rate. And so where we are as far as interest return at CalPERS on all of their investments, I don't think they're at the 6.7% or close to that right now. And so if they don't meet that by June 30th, the following fiscal year, it might have a smaller impact on us. But the previous fiscal year, I believe they got like 9.5% return.
9.8.
9.8. And so that's good for us. When we get our results from CalPERS in August of this year, we'll know what it is for the 2024 year. And so I'm expecting us to still be fully funded. It's the year after that might, if we don't have a strong increase in interest earnings in this quarter that we're in right now, it might have a small impact on us but we pre-funded. And so we're always in that 90, 95, 98%. And I think if you can be in that higher 98% market, you're doing really well for the future.
Okay, perfect. And then the other question is, next year's budget anticipates hiring the 2 vacancies. That's built into the budget, correct?
Yes, all of those positions are budgeted in there. And so if they remain vacant for a month or 2 or 3, we'll have some savings in there and we'll make some adjustments to the budget. And when we bring back the mid-year budget, we'll present that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the budget and have it move on to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arnerich,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Aye.
Chair Noah.
Yes. Thanks, Brian. Next item is an action item presented by Hisham Noemi to discuss the 2025 Measure J strategic plan.
I do have a small presentation, pulling it up. All right, thank you. Thanks, Trian. So good morning. We're asking you today to adopt a revised revenue forecast for the development of the 2025 strategic plan. The last one you adopted was in September 2024, before the elections, and with all the talk about tariffs and economic uncertainty, we felt that we really needed to revisit our assumptions and come back to you with a revised forecast for your consideration. So that's the topic of today. The revenue forecast is probably the most important factor in developing the strategic plan. That's how we determine how much additional capacity we have to program for capital projects. Okay, just a little bit background, in case you're not familiar. Measure J was approved in 2004, started in 2009. It's a 25-year measure, so we have 9 years left on the measure before it expires. As part of the expenditure plan that was approved by the voters, 57% roughly of the funding that was assumed is slated for programs like the local street maintenance, return to source money, the bus operations, and so on. And these get allocated to the programs on an annual basis based on fixed percentages in the expenditure plan. On the other hand, the remaining 42% or 43% goes not only pays for the capital project, but also for program management, as well as the debt service on issued bonds. For the capital projects, you really need to give them certainty on how much they will get in Measure J and when they will get it, so they can develop their own funding plans and meet the schedules for the projects. That's why we do the strategic plan. The expenditure plan doesn't really tell you which projects to do first, how to pay for debt service on issued bonds, what to do in case revenues fall short of projections. That's why we do the strategic plan. We look out 5 to 7 years. In this case, we're going to look out all the way to the end of the measure, 9 years. We're going to make sure our commitments don't exceed our revenues. The strategic plan is what helped us figure out how many bonds to issue, what's the size, and when to issue them. And that helped us accelerate the program of projects. Just as a point of reference, the 2022 strategic plan had $754 million programmed for capital projects. At this point, at the end of the fiscal year of 24, we've spent 95% of that money. So we pretty much delivered the program of projects. The only projects left are the ones with large shortfalls that as we're trying to find funding for other funding for them. We update the strategic plan every 2 to 3 years to revisit our assumptions on revenues, debt service, as well as our cash flow needs. So just highlights from the past 3 years since we adopted the board adopted the 2022 strategic plan. The last 3 years were actually great in terms of revenue. They exceeded our projections by about $48 million or 15%. And as Brian mentioned, thanks to his great work, we saved $7 million earlier this year on the bond debt service for the 2015 bonds. And thanks to the work of the projects teams, Stephanie specifically, you know, we were awarded the second largest grant in our history in October of last year, after you adopted the revenue forecast. And that grant, along with the other grants we got, you know, they're reimbursement based, so they need to be advanced with Measure J, and then we would seek reimbursement from the feds or the state. So they will have an impact on our cash flow, and we need to account for that in our strategic plan. We're gonna make sure our cash flow can absorb that such large expenditures. And the next 3 years, 3 to 4 years, we're gonna have a large construction program, anywhere between $500 million to $600 million program. And these are some of the projects that we anticipate to go in construction in the next 3 to 4 years. Not only Measure J projects we're advancing, but also we're advancing non-Measure J projects like the Countywide Smart Signal project, the shared mobility hubs, the 5 safe streets for all projects, and so on. And finally, you know, with the elections and the new administration in DC and all the talk about tariffs, you know, that had economic impacts, and that's what prompted us to talk to HDL to revisit our assumptions before we finish the strategic plan. So in terms of the revenue forecast, I mentioned the last 3 years were great. It just shows you what the revenues we were projecting to be in the last strategic plan compared to what we actually got, and it's 15% higher. That definitely helps us absorb any downturns in the future. And then this is what the board adopted in September 2024 as our revenue forecast. The red line is what we projected in the last strategic plan. And you can see we were projecting higher numbers in all cases than the red line. The solid black line is the baseline that you adopted. And you can see it's higher, basically higher revenues than we were projecting, about $134 million higher than what we're projecting in the 22 strategic plan. And you can see how, under the new revenue forecast, how the lines tighten around the red line. We're now not projecting as much additional revenues, $60 million instead of $135 million more. It's still positive news that we're still projecting $60 million more, but it's not as good as we thought in September 2024. And you can see the optimistic and the conservative scenarios just for your reference here. If you'd like to look at actual numbers, this table shows you the numbers. You know, the 2022 strategic plan estimated with that over the life of the measure, we're gonna have about $2.58 billion. And in September, we thought we're gonna be around $2.72 billion. Again, $134 million more. With the revised forecast, we're still projecting $60 million more than the 2022 strategic plan, but not as much as the older projection. We are recommending that you adopt the revised forecast. The last thing we want to do is overestimate our revenues and then come back later to reduce our programming. We want to be a little bit conservative, but we think the baseline is a good forecast to use for the 22 strategic plan, for the 2025 strategic plan. Again, you know, if anything changes between now and 6 months when we adopt the strategic plan, we'll come back to you. And also, That's why we update the strategic plan every 2 to 3 years, just to take into consideration any changes in the economy and so on. So in terms of the schedule, we are targeting to complete the strategic plan in December 2025. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Ron?
Yeah, thank you, Hashim, for the report. So on the in the staff report, there's reference back to the 2004 dollars. It compares today's dollars to those dollars. How, and I didn't see anything as far as a final number for the projections. Do you know how that's relative?
I'll have to look at my notes. I think when Measure J was developed, it assumed we're going to have $2 billion in 2004 dollars. Right now, I think with the new forecast, it's around 1.6, but I can send you the actual number. So we're still below the $2 billion number.
All right, thank you.
You have the Highway 4 interchange. Obviously, that's gonna be done when the Concord Naval Weapons Station's done. But how much further can we go without sort of funding found for that project?
I'm sorry,
So the Highway 4 680 interchange.
Yeah.
Still a big project, still remaining. Don't have really dedicated funds for it. So what's the strategic plan on what we do or not do with the limited sort of time frame that we've got at this point?
So the project you're referring to has 5 phases. We completed phase 3, which widened Highway 4. The next phase is phase 4 and 2A.
Got to renumber them. Start with 3, go to 4. What happened to 1?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
sorry.
Phase 4, just for your reference, is the direct connector from southbound 680 to eastbound 4. And 2A is an improvement to the southbound on-ramp from Highway 4 to 680. These projects we're almost done with design, and we're in the right-of-way phase. And we have enough money to do phase 4 from RM3. But what we're trying to do is leverage the RM3 money. We were trying to use it as a match for other sources. So we're supposed to hear tomorrow from SB1. We put in 2 applications, one asking for $58 million in TSIP money, Trade Corridor Enhancement Program money, and another one for $25 million. If we get the TSIP money, we should be able to do phase 2A and 4. If we don't, we're just going to do phase 4 next. And the future phases, we really need to have a new measure to get them done.
I just wanted to make sure we had that timed out.
Well, and maybe just to add, I mean, I think Hisham already kind of set it up in the presentation, but because we have this large construction, effort happening in the next like 3 to 4 years, if there's any new and available revenue, right, available based on the strategic plan, and like 42% of that goes to projects, any of that new revenue, we're probably just going to put it in construction reserves and be able to like prepare
because of the limited time frame.
Because of the limited time frame, right? And so I think, and hopefully we're successful with a future measure, but in the time being, we got to be very diligent and really focus on, okay, these are, and then I would also say like on some of the projects, some of the construction projects that are happening, like the Safe Streets for All projects, for example, the cities are actually on the hook, for the actual, if there's any claims or changes, right? The cities are actually on the hook for those 5 projects. And so we're doing our due diligence to really make sure that we set ourselves up for this next phase of construction, but with this strategic plan.
Rita?
Hisham, how much are we short for San Pablo Dam Road?
$100 million.
The figure keeps going up.
Yes.
As years go by.
Yeah.
The longer we wait, the higher it will go.
Yeah.
Oh. Newell, any questions?
No, I just have comments whenever we get to that.
But you can do comments.
Okay. First of all, I think this is a really important process that we go through. We're doing it a little more often than we used to. And it's because the event horizon in 9 years were, as Tim was mentioning, potentially we're done. What is really, really good news, when you look at what we estimated in 2004, what the total revenue would be and how much it's went up, is extraordinary. And not only that, the leverage points that we never could have imagined in our wildest dreams to get 3.5 to 4.5 times that in matching funds. So in terms of what we've accomplished, yeah, there's still work to do. But remember, it was the original plan, even like what we're looking at now, is billions and billions of dollars more than we'll ever collect. But relative to where we were and what we've accomplished, I think is great. But we're going to be doing this probably every 6 months, another 18 times to get us to that 9 years. So I think this is good. I also recommend, I agree, and would make a motion based on staff request.
Okay, do we have any, I'll check with public comments first.
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, so I guess we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, a second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we get the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arnridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier,
Hi.
Chair Noack.
Yes. Okay, thank you. The next item is, thank you, Hisham.
Thank you.
Next item is an action item presented by Lindy Johnson to discuss the CCTA rebrand.
Yay.
Still discussing what the brand's going to look like.
Terry Ann's my design consultant. Wonderful. Well, Chair Noack, Commissioners, I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about our brand strategy and to ask for your approval and to move to the board a revised, bolder, redesigned Contra Costa Transportation Authority logo. Before we get to the new logo, though, I did want to talk to you a bit about brand strategy and sort of how we found ourselves here in this conversation. So real quickly, I thought it would be helpful to talk about some of our sister brands or some of the organizations around us. So these are some of the logos that we see from some of the other transportation authorities throughout California. Some of what you will find they have in common is that most of them use capital letters, most of them emphasize T in some way, shape, or form, and few of them rely on a bug. A bug is a kind of older term in logo terminology, but generally it refers to something that is meant to be kind of a visual representation. In our case, it's that little circle in the left-hand side of our logo. When you tend to see a lot of logos like this all put together on a large screen, which often happens when we go to conferences and events, you'll find that Contra Costa Transportation Authority's logo is quite hard to find. I think there's a few reasons for that. It includes that Contra Costa is relatively thin fonted, and so it's quite hard to find it. It isn't bold in the same way that a lot of our other CTA organizations, in a way that the other CTA organizations are. It also tends to use lowercase lettering, and the way that the spacing of the letters are, it's kind of looks like a lot of text to take in at first sight. These are some of the observations that we made when we first started this process and that we brought to the consultants that we worked with throughout the process. So we began with a brand analysis. So I actually brought on Circle Point, much thanks to them for their support in this, to provide us with a brand analysis. We used the current external affairs budget to fund this whole effort. It was covered through last year and this year's budget, as you all approved. Thank you. And we spent about $20,000 on this brand analysis, which included internal and external focus groups. It included a community survey and a document that looked at all of the sub-brands that fall under the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Things like 511, Safe Routes to School, Pass to Class, Innovate 680, McCollum's branding, Highway 4's branding. I could go on. We have quite a lot of sub-brands here at CCTA. The document also helped us to think through taglines and tried to get a sense of whether or not there was kind of a consistent messaging that we were using but just hadn't necessarily captured within our logo or branding document. We took that brand analysis and we did a call for interest from a lot of our bench members to do the actual design of the logo. So through that process, we identified a handful of firms who were interested, provided us a lot of examples of previous work that they did, and we ended up awarding the task order to Civic Edge, a firm who's here in the Bay Area and has a lot of experience with logo redesign. It was really wonderful to get to work with their designer, Brian, on this project. We awarded the task order for about $60,000, which included the full logo branding work, as well as the full suite of related materials. And we'll go through some of what that looked like, but it included branding guidelines. It will include a full PowerPoint suite, as well as the process for deciding on the logo, which, as you may imagine, is actually quite lengthy. We started with about 40 different potential designs, all to narrow it down to the design we are with here. And I did also want to acknowledge and thank staff for their efforts in this process. We did an internal staff survey where staff gave us their feedback on what logos they liked best, and they let me take up some air and space in many staff meetings to sort of go over this process and to get their feedback. So our goals with the rebrand were to enhance public recognition, to reflect the modern values and strategies of CCTA, to improve consistency. I talked a lot about those sub-brands in the slide before, but that was a huge priority here. We wanted to really find a way to streamline the many different brands we're putting out into the world and connect them better back to CCTA and the work that's being done here as an agency, and to strengthen engagement, right? Make it easier for folks to find us, to know who we are, to understand what we do, and to see our logo from quite a distance so that they could associate us with many of the projects that we are working on or have been a proud funder of. You'll often find that when you see CCTA's logo right now on a sign as you're driving by at 40 or 60 miles an hour, it's quite hard to see. And we wanted folks to be able to see that from quite a distance. We also recognize that we're in a period of time in which it's quite important for the public to know who we are and to understand that the work that we do currently and have done for them in the past. And that is a bit challenging when you're going out to the public with many different brands and many different identities. And we really felt it was important to sort of address that and to come forward with something we felt like was really bold, easy for folks to capture, and hopefully easy for them to connect to. The messages that we wanted the brand to convey were that we were effective, knowledgeable, innovative, and fiscally responsible. Obviously, a logo can't talk, and it's probably not possible for it to communicate all of these things, but they are considered within our style guide and the branding guidelines and will help us as we continue to develop messaging and branding moving forward. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to move forward with design direction and also reveal the logo itself, though you've had the packet for some time, so. I assume most of you have seen it. I also did quickly want to mention that the PowerPoint you're looking at is quite simple, not our normal PowerPoints here, and that was also by design. I didn't want to use the old logos template since we are putting forward a new logo. So once approved, should you approve the new logo, we will have a full redo of our PowerPoint suite, and you'll also start to notice some minor changes in our PowerPoint presentations as we come to you as a board. So these were the things things we considered in considering CCTA's voice. Again, similar to our messaging, we wanted to be trustworthy, reliable, to be seen as intelligent problem solvers, to be energetic and exciting, and lastly, and in some ways most importantly, we wanted something we felt was bolder. These were some of the inspiration logos for many reasons, but you'll notice a lot of them do use some bold fonts. They're fairly simple and easy to understand. I will say if you're really into the design world, kind of get a sense here of whether we preferred serif or sans serif fonts. All of these fonts have a lot in common, and that was something that we sort of stuck to as we moved forward in the design process. And now I'm very happy and excited to present our proposed logo redesign. This is the proposed updated logo. It is bolder. We are using a much deeper and bolder font, and we are emphasizing the T here with its own somewhat unique identity. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority is part of the logo and should remain, should we move forward with this. In this way, we are able to go identify ourselves as CCTA and as the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. We felt this logo also told a story. It communicates that we are in Contra Costa and that it is an important part of the work that we do, but the transportation is really where we are emphasizing. We wanted that T to communicate a level of movement, both that you could move on it and through it, and that it could be used as a bike path or a rail line, as well as a street or path. One other thing I did want to just mention is in the previous logo, we often went by CCTA. In fact, you can even find a logo on Google Images that has CCTA and our little bug above it. But in our style guide, there actually was no logo in which we were able to go by CCTA. And one of the things that we often heard from staff and as well as externally is that folks liked going by CCTA. And we were kind of excited to move forward with just being and naming ourselves CCTA and being able to use that as part of our identity and branding. This is what the logo will look like when we are using it in plain color, both in black and in white. Just think this is helpful. It's often something you'll see on business cards and letterhead in situations in which you can't print in color. Also thought it was helpful to sort of see what this could look like if it was, and I'm not sure why that, oh, there we go. Is it showing up for you? Oh, perfect. Okay, sorry, had a bit of a delay there. See what it could look like in use. So this is what it looks like on a bus stop, on a sweatshirt, and in some ways, most importantly, what it looks like on a road sign. This is giving you a sense of how it would be used in really large scale. It also shows you some of those style guide colors being used with the new logo. So these are actually colors we'd already adopted. We are not changing the primary color palette of CCTA, but it is nice to see that that new logo still works very well and very closely with those colors in the color palette we had put forward. I had mentioned earlier that we could kind of play with this as being a path or showing movement. This is just giving you an example of what that could look like. This is likely something we would use at the end of a YouTube video or perhaps on social media, but we could also continue to animate this in many different ways for many different projects. So I wanted to talk briefly about sub-brands and what this could look like with sub-brands. Also, our general recommendation is that the logo be co-branded from now on with any logo that has already been built within CCTA or any brands that we build moving forward. To give you a sense of what that would look like, we are recommending that we use Powered by CCTA above logos so that folks have that immediate and obvious connection. I will say, because these are mostly internal logos, we do also have the ability to kind of rebrand them in some small ways. For example, I've talked briefly with Stephanie about potentially changing some colors on Innovate 680 so that the two brands kind of look more cohesive than they might here. But the general idea is that we put Powered by CCTA above brands that are primarily funded through Measure J and through the Transportation Authority so that folks have that immediate connection and understanding. This is what that would look like if you were not to put it in color. I also wanted to talk quickly about 511 Contra Costa. So currently 511 Contra Costa has their own branding and very strong brand identity. What is tough about that is it's not very well connected to CCTA. It's one of the primary ways that we go out and interact with the public and in many ways serve them. But we generally do that under a completely separate brand and brand identity. And what we found from our brand analysis, both through the focus groups and the survey, is that there's not a lot of awareness that we are really kind of under one umbrella. And so we are considering looking at bringing 511 Contra Costa into into CCTA's brand as 511 CCTA. I'm not seeking your approval on this at this time. I did just want to give you an example of some of the ways that we could adjust sub-brands to really create more consistency. Obviously, in the slide before, we're simply just showing that Powered by. But in the case of 511, we could also explore just a name change that builds that immediate brand knowledge and identity. And here's a sense of what that might look like in action. In your packet, there was also proposed branding guidelines, and I wanted to just pause and take a moment to acknowledge that was a meaty document and also something somewhat new for us here at CCTA, but something we think is incredibly important. As a funding agency, we really do rely on our partners to help to enhance our brand identity and to give folks an understanding of what that relationship looks like. If we don't have branding guidelines, if we don't include some instructions in our funding agreements and contracts, it's not always easy for our partners to know how to promote us. And it's also not always easy for us to communicate after the fact that we would like to be given credit or recognition or be part of any kind of ribbon cutting or branding that might be associated with a project or program. And so these branding guidelines are really our way of putting forward recommendations to staff as they build agreements and contracts that would provide that clarity for our partners and also give them quick references, right? Here's our press kit, here's our style guide, this is how we'd like the brand to be used and where we'd like it to be used. But I also acknowledge that it is somewhat of a shift. Primarily, we've asked this to happen in most construction projects, many return to source projects, for example, but will be something newer for our programs, right? Asking folks like our transit operators, for example, to provide some acknowledgement of CCTA and the relationship and partnership they have with CCTA. In the branding guidelines, we provide lots of ways that they could do that. It is not suggested that they do it one specific way, but simply that they do consider including us in some way, shape, or form, and an acknowledgement, again, of the partnership that does exist so that the public has some awareness that CCTA is part of the overall transportation ecosystem. That concludes my presentation on the rebrand. I am seeking your approval on the new updated Boulder Contra Costa Transportation Authority logo, as well as the related style guide and branding guidelines. Thank you. I'm open for any questions.
Okay, questions? Questions, comments, Rita?
I like it.
That's it, huh? Okay, well, that was good. All right. Ron?
Yeah, I'm going to be really careful when I make any comments because I know there's a ton of time and energy and personal viewpoints that goes into any of this, and to get us to this point is a lot of work. I was involved in rebranding, and it's a lot. Also, the budget that's been expended so far is really reasonable for a branding exercise. So obviously, there's a lot of in-house work being done with it. So thank you for that. I guess I saw a couple things. There was, does the CCTA have a tagline? Like I noticed there was where mobility meets community, I think it said.
Yeah, it's a great question. You can tell you have been through this process before. So we did not decide to go forward with just having an agreed upon tagline. CCTA has used a few different things. We've used let's get there together most frequently. And we like that and feel like it's fairly relevant and would like to continue to use it in certain circumstances. Given some of the work with the CTP though, and some of the ways in which the Contra Costa Transportation Authority may be continuing to evolve and how we interact with the public, we also thought where mobility meets community could find a certain fit in certain programs. And given that and recognizing that we will just continue to grow, we decided not to move forward with a specific tagline, though we do anticipate we will start to use a few pretty consistently as we always have.
Okay, so you're saying you might use more than one tagline then?
Right. We anticipate that there may be 2 or 3 that we use interchangeably in different circumstances, and we're not wanting to move away from one specifically, and so we decided to not codify having one specific tagline.
Okay, because personally, I just think having one for CCTA that would be broad enough for everything, because I just think a tagline is really important. Like I like the where vision meets, or where mobility meets community. But I like let's get there together. I think that's really cool. So that was just one comment. The other thing is the powered by CCTA. So that's a pretty bold statement too, right? The whole powered thing, as far as it could say a lot of different things. So that's making a statement. When it was shown above the other logos, it kind of got lost because it was all in black, and if the T was blue, it was so small. So I think it needs to be more prominent so that, to your point about driving past a project and not really noticing CCTAs involved, I think there needs to be some way of making that stand out more. I don't know exactly how. Maybe making it bigger than the other one, but I just think I just didn't think it was that prominent. And if the goal is to have more prominence, I think that would be something. The 511 CCTA, I don't know if that's the exact name. I just thought maybe we'll put CCTA on top of it, just so it has the prominence of CCTA over the 511. Again, to push the brand out on everything, that it's the overarching organization, as opposed to everything that's a subset to it. So that was something else. And yeah, I think overall it's really cool. I love it. It's simple. And I think it'll definitely, when you're put up with a bunch of other agencies, it's going to stand out better, which is the goal, because and then also how it looks on all the swag too is important, right? I like the sweatshirt design, something that's different, hats, whatever. And then I guess my last question is, what do you anticipate to be the cost to implement this? Because fortunately we're in a digital age, so it's not a lot of paper like it used to be, but if you're talking about vehicles and cards and, you know, jackets and, you know, it can be a lot.
It's a really great question. We'll take all of that feedback back to the team and try to address some of those things for the presentation to the board. So thank you for that feedback. For your last question, we're anticipating about $10,000 will be the implementation cost. The three primary things that we'll cover is actually replacing the sign behind you. The screen is there right now, but we have a large CCTA sign there. Ensuring all of our staff have updated business cards. We think it's important that that logo be what they are communicating with, and replacing the sign actually out front. There's a little marquee sign that exists there. Those are the largest cost. As you said, most of our other things are digital, and so all of our letterhead and anything that we're doing in the digital space is easy. And then we also are saying for all of our partners in our branding guidelines that we welcome them to use anything they have with our current logo and then just replace it upon natural replacement, which is what we intend to do for most of our materials as well. For example, for the community event series this year, we didn't order any new swag because we intend, once this is approved, to order all of that next year. And so, I'm sorry, in the next fiscal year. And so we've sort of planned for this internally. I think that for anyone who has a jacket and wants to use the old logo, I don't think, and you know, Tim has not indicated that there will be any banning. But should we get to the point where we're naturally replacing things, we'll obviously be using the new logo.
Okay, because to the extent that the goal is to make this bold new statement, as much as can be done at one time early on, the better, I would just recommend. Having been through kind of this rollout where people don't know what, you know, and then your old logo shows up on some prominent presentation you're making somewhere, and you're like, well, how did that happen? So I would just recommend that, you know, as quickly, it can get kind of costly, but I think it's important if the goal, which it is to push out this new brand, this new look.
Thank you, appreciate that. We'll certainly take that into account. We're just also trying to keep costs low.
Neil, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I would like to add to it. First of all, I think this is crucial timing for us to take this opportunity to sort of reevaluate who we are, what we represent. And I think we have never really had a serious look at how our branding, our name, is associated and how it should be displayed on roadside. I was looking at the one we had on San Ramon Valley Boulevard, which was funded by Measure J. And, you know, Lindy and the team have worked on ways of how the logo should be. And truthfully, our agencies, that's all we need to know. We need a guidance because we just do it the way we do it. And I think standardizing that is really important. I like the powered by, you know, and I like the fact that we have a couple of taglines. Powered by is something that's an action, makes you feel like, yes, transportation. And, you know, I got to participate a little bit earlier on this when we were looking at alternative. I actually have one suggestion, and I know this is late in the game. And to look at the word where we have Contra Costa, then we take Transportation Authority and we make that 2 lines. That I happen to have one, but if you look at our exact logo, only move the word authority and put it on the same line as transportation. So it says Contra Costa, it's got our logo, Contra Costa, Transportation Authority, and the word Transportation Authority has a hang line at the width of the logo on each side. I don't know if you looked at that. I think it has a strength because what it does, it reinforces as a phrase, Transportation Authority. Otherwise, you're reading it as individual words. So a teeny tiny change, and it doesn't change anything except for maybe strength of that. So that's the only comment I have. But otherwise, the whole concept of everything we're doing, this is the right time and really fantastic solutions. And I think one of the coolest things I saw, and I hadn't seen before, was the little video introduction on how the T, which represents the highways, did that graphic presentation, and then our logo showed up. I think in all of our presentations and on our website, that would be very cool to see.
Thank you, Noel. Yeah, we can certainly look at that. And again, I can bring it back to the team and potentially bring it to the board with both options. That's a fairly small movement of the word and would obviously, whatever the board feels like would be the best representation between those two options, we'd be happy to move forward with.
Ron?
Thank you. Just one more thing I noticed. On the, where we had the CCTA slide, it says your tax dollars at work. There's an urban setting behind it. Is that what you're proposing to use for this, or is that just an example?
It's simply an example, yeah.
Okay.
And part of it is that it's an easy way to show where they would put up those large walls.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just pulled it from the internet, but we certainly could find a different background.
And then I guess the last thing is, ultimately, I think the idea is to end up with like a Nike swoosh or something that it's just one thing. And I think the T could potentially, as the brand builds, could be that one thing that could go on the hat or something where people might ask, what does that stand for, as opposed to, having to explain it all and having it just be long and drawn out. So I always like the little things. So I think that's a cool one for Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Thank you.
We agree.
I am not a branding person at all. I stick with the numbers, that's it. So I like the moving highway T thing on the digital stuff. I think that's really cool. So that's it for my comments. Because yeah, it's not my thing. Anyway, okay, that's it for comments. Great. Any public comments?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay. I need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arnerich?
He said aye, even
Okay.
though he didn't.
Commissioner Bernal?
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Vice Chair Xavier?
Aye.
Chair Noack?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next item is, next item is correspondence and communications. We have no correspondence in the packet. Now moving to commissioner and staff comments. Any commissioner comments? Staff comments? Really?
No comments.
It's a miracle. Okay. Okay. Then we are adjourned. The next regular meeting is proposed for July 10th to the 4th of July. That concludes our meeting, and the meeting's adjourned at 10:28. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.